In today's video, I want to share with you a powerful lesson that I learned during the worst parts of my job when I was working as a management consultant at Bain & Company, and how this lesson helped me better understand why it was that I just didn't really fit into that environment and why I didn't love the work that I was doing. And especially now that I'm on the other side of things where I'm working at a startup that I absolutely love, this same lesson has helped me understand why exactly it is that I'm enjoying it so much. And so I wanted to share with you the same lesson so that way you could better assess whether the current job that you're doing is one that you truly love or one that you probably should move on from. And one thing I find funny is that this lesson is actually something I've never really heard anyone else explain in the same way that I'm hoping to do so in this video today, but it's super simple. And so I hope you get the same value from it that I got as well.
By the way, I'm Neil. I'm 27 years old. I'm from the US, where I was born and raised, went to school, studied mechanical engineering, and then worked in consulting for a handful of years. Right after that, I moved to China for a year to do the Schwarzman Scholarship, and then came to Sydney, Australia, where I work at an amazingly cool startup called VOW. Probably the coolest startup you've never heard of before. Initially, I made this channel to help people like my former self, which was someone who was wanting to get into management consulting, but didn't actually have any clue how to do that. My videos have slowly turned over the years into talking more about life and about how you work a career that you really love. And so I plan to share more lessons like this that I learn either from the amazing places that I get to work at or the amazing people that I get to work alongside. So I hope you enjoy that. So if you like those videos, stick around. If not, I don't know, comment what you think you'd like more. But now let's get to the lesson of the video, which is as follows. In an ideal work environment, you want to be able to aspire or want to become more like the people who are the most respected in your organization. In simpler terms, do you want to become more like the people at the top or the people who are the most celebrated? If this is the case, and you actually do, then it's probably a good environment for you to be in, at least from that perspective, and you can expect to do good work and be happy. But to illustrate my point on what this does and doesn't look like, I wanted to give you some examples. To talk about what this doesn't look like, I actually, unsurprisingly, want to draw upon my experiences back in consulting. So like I mentioned, right after college, I went straight into consulting at Bain & Company. And I should make the caveat, like, people at Bain are amazing. I really enjoyed my experience, but there were certain points where I just didn't feel like I fit in, and this lesson helped me understand why. It's no surprise that in consulting firms, the people who are the most respected are the partners, and oftentimes other senior leaders as well. One example would be, you would be in your team room with your team, and then the partner would walk in, and everyone was talking beforehand, and then when the partner walks in, everyone stops talking and looks at the partner. And for the first couple times, I was super weird. I was like, why are we stopping to talk? You know, they're not like God coming in, right? They're just another, colleague of ours. Obviously, they are more senior, but it doesn't mean we need to stop talking and look at them like this, right? Or another example would be, I would be out in a team dinner with my team, and people would start to bring up conversational topics like talking about the partner's wine collection when the partner wasn't even there. And for me, there's a lot of reasons why I didn't care for that topic. One, I don't drink wine, but then also we could talk about so much more exciting things, right? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, oh, they're not actually talking about these things or bringing up these topics because they actually care about it, but because they really respect this person. And so in situations like this, their mind just goes towards those things. And so for me personally, when I was going through my rougher times at Bain, specifically when I wasn't performing as well and when the work was really hard, I was having to wrestle with that and being someone who had high expectations for myself but wasn't meeting them from what this organization was telling me, right? Because then it started to trigger within me the thought process of, do I actually want to be good on the benchmarks or on the rubrics that they are guiding me on? And if I do, who do I become? And of course, the natural answer to that is you become more like the partners, or you become more like the senior managers and the people above you, right? And so then the question becomes, do you actually want to become more like those people? And for me, of course, the answer was no. Once I realized that, it lifted a weight off of my shoulders. I didn't have to worry about not being the best second-year consultant ever, because that's not what I wanted to be, because the things that it was optimizing me for was not necessarily what I actually wanted to do with my life or with my career. But again, the people in consulting are not all bad. And there were a lot of people who I did look up to and who I did want to become more like. But those people would oftentimes work in consulting for 2-3 years and then go do something else, whether it was a startup or something that they enjoyed doing. And they wouldn't stick around until senior manager, partner, senior partner. But that was consulting, and that was my example of what that doesn't look like. So now I want to share some examples of what it does look like, at least in my personal experience, to have worked at places where I actually wanted to become more like the people who were the most respected in the organization. So like I mentioned, after consulting, I went and worked at a startup in Sydney, Australia called VOW. I joined VOW at the end of 2021 when Australia was still under lockdown. And this was when this company VOW was just at 35, 40 people. I applied online, having never been to Australia, because I was super interested in this startup that was trying to take the cells of animals and then grow that into meat, but with the mission that they didn't want to replicate the things that we've already been eating, like chicken nuggets or beef patties. They instead wanted to use this technology to do new things that people had never eaten before. And so that mission really got to me, both because it was an amazing product vision, kind of like how Tesla or Apple paints, but then also because it was an incredibly important thing for us to be doing from a sustainability and climate change perspective. And so I was all on board. So at the beginning of 2022, when Australia opened its borders, I came to Australia and started working at Vow in person full time. And what I quickly realized was that even though there was only 40 people at this company, there were at least 3 or 4 people within the senior leadership team who I found myself really respecting and wanting to become more like because of individual traits, or because of the way that they lived their lives in a way that I hope that my older version was more like. And maybe I could give some examples. One example is, of course, of the founder of the company, George, someone who took an incredibly risky bet to start working on this company and has worked to blood, sweat, and tears to make it come alive. So I really respected that. Someone who put the work in to change the world to how he saw fit, to solve this big problem of animal industrial agriculture and the way that we are currently getting our meat, and trying to create a new process that would alleviate that and ideally solve this huge problem within climate change. Or another example is our current COO, a woman named Ellen, who is one of the best people I've ever worked with. She is a leader who I found to be very demanding of the people that she worked with, but in a really kind and empathetic way. And she pushed you because she knew you wanted to be pushed that way, and then wouldn't let you get away with anything less than your best. So these ideas of how do you take ownership of problems in the world and actually see them through, or how do you get the most out of people and inspire them to become better versions of themselves, while also becoming better members of a team. I think these are just some really basic examples, to be honest, but ones that stuck out to me, especially when I made that transition from consulting, which is a world where, you don't necessarily own the problems that you are solving and you don't have skin in the game, to then this other side of the world where literally other side of the world where I moved to Australia, but then the other side of the spectrum where I was at this pre-Series A startup of people who were just trying to basically make this moonshot technology become something that could save the world in a really big way. And so for me, seeing these traits within these people made me much more motivated to want to be there and work there, because I knew that throughout every day and every week that I was there, I would be able to look up to them and literally see people doing things in a way that I hope that I could be seeing myself do that in the future. And I could take notes, I could learn, I could ask them questions, while also doing my own work and being pushed from that perspective as well. And so that for me is an example of what it does look like. And of course, I can go into that much, much more in depth on what is it like to work at a startup, what is it like to be surrounded by so many amazing people who have such diverse backgrounds but are all working on the same mission. That's something I can definitely talk about in future videos, but I just wanted to share those anecdotes to talk about what does it mean to work in an environment where the people who are the most praised in that environment are also the people that you look up to and want to become more like. And the last point I wanted to touch on was why. Why is this such a powerful lens to view where you work and why it might be a place that you either do or don't want to work? I think it comes down to another simple heuristic that I heard a couple of years ago that I really love, which is that culture at a company or within a team is just 3 things. The first one is it's what you punish. The second is what you tolerate. And the third thing is it's what you praise. And of course, what we're talking about here is that third thing, what you praise. And so within an organization, the easiest way I find to be able to see what they praise is by seeing who is the most praised, and then understanding what do they do, who they are, and do you want to become more like that person? Because by working in an organization, it will naturally funnel you to becoming more of what that organization needs, which is who that organization praises. And then it's up to you and I, for any place that we work, do we want to become more like that? Or do we want to do something different? And thus that place makes less sense for us to work at.